Destroy them all! One more time. Hey folks, I'm Joe. This is Same Name, Different Game, and it has been a decade. 10 years since I first sat on a hand-me-down futon I got from my parents and told you all about the PC Engine port of Salamander and the NES port of Life Force. And in that time, I have lived in 5 houses across 3 states, gotten married, got rid of that futon, met a whole bunch of you, collaborated on videos with people whose work I'm a big fan of, and more. So, let's get started with a little history about the show. On February 25th, 2011, the first episode of Same Name, Different Game was posted to blip.tv and onthestick.com. This is what the site looked like back then. At the time, the Angry Video Game Nerd was about to hit his 100th episode. The Happy Video Game Nerd had not yet begun to stop skeletons from fighting. Pat the NES Punk was still fighting the guy who worked at the game store instead of making podcasts with him. And YouTube didn't allow for high-def uploads or videos over 10 minutes for most people. I wanted to make a show for the internet about classic games, but desperately didn't want to be a ripoff of AVGN, which was very much still in style at the time. After thinking on it, I settled on Same Name, Different Game, and opted to start with one of my all-time favorite NES games, Life Force, and its counterpart on my relatively recently acquired PC Engine. It's honestly kinda hard to believe that it's been that long. But it's 10 years later, and here we are, and I'm still at it. Now, back in that very first video, I tried to quickly encapsulate the history of Life Force in the arcade. Let's take a look.
Needless to say, on the heels of Gradius, Salamander was a massive success, and later that same year, it was translated into English. Well, okay, it was more than translated, really. It was reworked to take place inside of a giant alien monster. Many of the enemy sprites were changed. Now, that caught on so well that it was brought back over to Japan, and even more changes were made. Big changes to the backgrounds, and the boss sprites were changed as well. From a gameplay perspective, the largest change in the Japanese version was a return to the Gradius power-up system. Both the US, Europe, and Japanese releases of that game are known as Life Force. Confused yet?
And, well, yeah, that's not inaccurate. It's a pretty heavy oversimplification. So let's do it right. Let's dig into Salamander and both arcade versions of Life Force. But before we get there, of course, we've got to do a little history about Konami's flagship shoot-'em-up series. Times change, and while it's weird to think of it now, Konami was at one time a prolific force in video games. In the arcade and home, they were broadly considered one of the best developer publishers in the world. Their first big hit was Frogger, released in arcades in 1981, during the golden age of the arcade. That same year, Scramble was released, sometimes considered the first game in the Gradius series. But it wasn't until 1985 that Konami would release the first proper entry in their flagship shooting game series, with the original Gradius, known outside of Japan in arcades as Nemesis. Gradius was a massive hit in Japan, but after looking through 1985 and 86 issues of Playmeter, I found it appeared to barely make a dent in North American arcades. Not once did it hit the monthly top 50 arcade games in all the issues I found preserved online. But it turned out that it wouldn't really matter, because Konami had entered the home market in 1983 with games on the MSX home computer, and then in 1984 publishing games for Nintendo's Famicom, the Japanese NES. Their cozy relationship with Nintendo, a result of that early partnership, would one day infamously lead to them being one of only 2 companies allowed to release 10 games per year in North America, instead of just 5. And it was on the NES that Gradius became a household name here in the States, as Konami's first release in the territory in 1986. But that's not all that happened on the Gradius front in 1986. No. Konami also released that year into arcades a follow-up to Gradius, Salamander in Japan, and Life Force abroad. Salamander is, in hindsight, not considered a sequel to Gradius, though I gather it does take place in the same continuity if you're the kind of weirdo who's invested in the lore of a series of shoot-'em-ups. Which I kinda am, honestly. But at the time, there was no Gradius 2, and there wouldn't be outside of Japan for a really long time. The naming conventions were just off the rails here in the West. The first arcade game was Nemesis, as was the first Game Boy game, but the first NES game was Gradius, and the second Game Boy game was Gradius Interstellar Assault. The second arcade game was Vulcan Venture. To make it more confusing, neither the Famicom nor PC Engine Super CD ports of Gradius 2, Gopher no Yabo, came to North America on the NES or Turbo Duo either. The first official release of Gradius 2 under its original title in the US was as part of the Gradius collection on PSP in 2006. Until then, it seemed Life Force was Gradius 2 for us, and the release of Gradius 3 on the Super NES didn't seem to quibble with that. Salamander is very similar to Gradius, with 3 major exceptions. First and foremost, the power-up system is completely different. You now pick up actual power-ups instead of capsules that move the selector on a menu at the bottom of the screen. This is, as I said 10 years ago of the PC Engine version, a bit of a double-edged sword. While it can make it easier to get certain power-ups, particularly options, referred to as multiple in this game, it also makes it a lot harder to get others, like the laser and ripple laser, called pulse laser here, and especially the shield. But I do agree with myself from 10 years ago in that, generally speaking, this makes the game easier. The second big change from Gradius is that the even-numbered stages now scroll vertically, making this both a horizontally and vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up. A rarity even now, but extremely rare in 1986. The final difference from its predecessor is that Salamander allows for 2-player simultaneous action, where Gradius only allowed 2 players alternating. You know, it's really too bad that Salamander is not a canonical sequel to Gradius, or I could call it, yeah, you know, the platonic ideal of a sequel. More of everything in a slicker package. I guess it will just have to settle for being the platonic ideal of a spin-off. Life Force, as we North Americans know it in arcades, is not entirely the same game as Salamander. Both Salamander and Life Force hit their respective territories in 1986, but Konami did some work on the US version. At first blush, you wouldn't notice much because the first stage is basically unchanged. But as you proceed, you come to realize that they really took the theme of that first stage, flying through a giant monster, and extended it to the whole game, and they made it clear by adding a bunch more voice clips to the American release. You first enter the stomach muscle zone, then the kidney zone, then stomach inner chamber, which feels weird. Why leave the stomach to go to the kidneys and then come back to the stomach? Maybe this creature Zelos has multiple stomachs, like a cow? Who knows? Anyways, then it's on to the liver zone, the lung zone, and finally the brain zone, which has actually barely been changed at all and just looks like a standard space military base type stage. But now I'm thinking about this, and stomach, kidneys, liver, lungs, brain. Where did your ship enter this creature? These voiceovers also apply to the bosses. Where Salamander largely just declared that an enemy had broken the force field, here in North America we were told what part of the boss to destroy in order to beat it, which is actually a big help on the final boss, because you don't shoot it where you think you would in the arcade version. But honestly, there are very few differences between the initial Japanese release and the North American one. It's mostly color changes and the additional voices. I didn't notice any differences on the default difficulty in power-up placement, or enemy placement, or behavior. But that would not necessarily remain the case when Life Force made its way back across the Pacific. It seems like Life Force did okay in the States, because the following year, in 1987, Konami decided to take it back to Japan and make even more changes. The additional voices remain, but now the majority of stages have major graphical differences, not just backgrounds, but also enemies and bosses. The first stage remains largely the same, but even here, some of the enemies are different. But the biggest and most notable difference is the change to the power-up system. The gradius power-up meter is back, allowing the player to choose their upgrades and the order in which they receive them, though, as I said earlier, it does make getting the multiple drones much harder. Still, there is something nice about being able to get a laser in a stage that otherwise doesn't provide one in earlier versions of this game. Well, let's go back to the stages. Stage 2 adds this gross-looking cell wall to the background. Stage 3 similarly adds a gross-looking cell wall and blue flames to imitate stomach acid or something? Heartburn? No idea, but this looks a lot weirder than the original version. Stage 4 is among the less changed, with a gross cell wall at the beginning instead of empty space, and now the volcanoes shoot out mucus? Slime? Whatever that is? Stage 5 adds a background of, I guess, lung tissue, and as with other stages featuring asteroids thus far, they're changed to weird clusters of tissue. This boss also gets the raddest transformation, honestly. I mean, just check that thing out. And the final stage, well, it's got a gross cell wall at the beginning, but otherwise pretty much the same. In terms of the stage-to-stage gameplay, almost nothing has changed. The only thing I can say I noticed is the Stage 2 boss now rotates its tendrils in the opposite direction. That's seriously it, at least when it comes to enemy behavior. As far as placement, the only thing I picked up on is these 3 enemies in Stage 1 who aren't there on the default difficulty in earlier versions. But there is one other gameplay-related change that's pretty frustrating. While the original 2 arcade releases don't allow continues per se during single-player games, they do at least allow you to feed in extra credits for additional lives. This is controlled via dip switch and can be set for up to 9 credits per play at 7 lives per credit for a total of 63 lives. This operator setting appears to have been removed from the Japanese version of Life Force. Now, while I am playing on the Arcade Archives version and not a real board, Hamster is pretty meticulous about this stuff, and I don't see them removing that from just this version for kicks. And look, this game is hard enough as is. While I can see the argument against credit feeding your way through a game like this that respawns right where you die, that is, for me, the best way to learn a game. And in this particular game, where Stage 5 specifically is absolutely brutal, making you go all the way back to the start to try to deal with it again is totally ridiculous. My only theory about why they would do this is to encourage co-op play. After all, 2 pockets full of tokens is better than 1. The arcade versions of these games have been released a fair few times. First on the PS1 and Saturn as the Salamander Deluxe Pack Plus. These are technically ports of Salamander and the Japanese Life Force, not emulation, but still very close to the arcade, right down to the inability to continue. Also on the PSP as Salamander Portable, again missing the American Life Force, but at least granting you continues for the Japanese one. And recently by Hamster in 2 forms. The budget option would really be the Konami Arcade Classics collection, which includes both Salamander and American Life Force, alongside several other Konami arcade games. But the one I played for this video was the Solo Arcade Archives release, which is ultimately more expensive, $8 for 3 versions of this game instead of $20 for 2 versions plus a bunch of other games, but it crucially does include all 3 games, as well as more settings. So, that's the sordid arcade saga of Salamander and Life Force, and even though the soundtracks are the same, and even though we kinda already did this, let's go ahead and do like we always do and take a look and a listen side by side.
An intruder has penetrated our... Destroy center membrane. Flame eruption. Flame eruption. Flame eruption. Flame eruption. Acid flame. Multiple. Destruct missile. Acid flame. Acid flame. Acid flame. Acid flame.
Aesthetics here are going to be up to your taste, but the almost Cronenbergian visuals of the Japanese Life Force take it for me. American Life Force feels a bit phoned in, and Salamander just feels a little bland, if I'm being honest. And that makes it time to give the edge. And yeah, I think Japanese Life Force looks the coolest. It's actually the most frustrating one to play. So I guess I'll say that American Life Force is my favorite of these 3, but the truth is, they're all so frustrating and so difficult that I would actually recommend either the PC Engine or NES ports over all of them. And I've already talked about these. And I stand by pretty much everything I said about them 10 years ago. So, before I go, hey you. Yeah, you. Watching this video right now. Thank you. I don't know if you've been watching since that first episode that was posted to onthestick.com 10 years ago, or even watching this YouTube channel from before that when I was making music videos out of games like Life Force and other shoot-'em-ups. Or if you just got here with the most recent episode on Jeopardy. But either way, thanks for checking out the show and supporting the channel. Let's see where things go in the next decade. And we're going to get started on that road in the next episode, which I am sure you will want to come back for, because there's somebody else around here who's celebrating a 10th anniversary in the next episode. And I'm sure that when he gets here, the pleasure will be all yours. We'll see you then. Hey folks, it's Joe, and thank you so much again for watching, for sticking with me for 10 years, or again, for just joining the show now. If you liked what you saw, do all the stuff that everybody on this site asks you to do. Like, comment, subscribe, ring the stupid bell so you don't miss an episode, and so on and so forth. If you really like the show, consider supporting in a more direct fashion. Down in the description below, there is a Ko-Fi link for one-time tips, or you can contribute regularly to the show either as a YouTube channel member or on Patreon, where just $1 per video will get you early access, the chance to vote in polls about upcoming videos, and more, including your name here with these cool people. There's also merch links, as well as affiliate links to small businesses that I personally also shop at. If you're going to check those out anyways, use those links below and I get a little bit of a kickback. Really does help the channel. If you would like to watch the entire run of Same Name Different Game from 10 years ago until now, on the left there is a playlist that does just that. And if you want more Konami shooting madness, on the right is a link to my episode on Gradius